எதன் கண்ணே நிலையாகி இருந்திடும் உலகமெல்லாம் எதனதெல்லாம் எதனின்று அனைத்துலகும் எழுமோ மற்றிவையாவும் எதன் பொருட்டாம் எதனால் இவ்வையமெல்லாம் எழுந்திடும் இவ்வெல்லாமும் எதுவே ஆகும் அதுதானே உளபொருளாம் சத்தியமாம் அச்சொருபம் அகத்தில் வைப்பான் இருமுலை நடுமார்படி வயதிதன் மேல் இருமுப்பொருளுள நிரம்பல இவற்றுள் ஒரு பொருளாம்பல் அரும்பென உள்ளே இருவிரல் வலத்தே இருப்பதும் இதயம் அதன் முகம் மிகழுள தகமுள சிறு துளை அதனிலாஜாதியோடமர்ந்துளதிருந்தமும் அதனை ஆசிரித்துள அகிலமானாடிகள் அது வழி மனதுளி அவற்றினதிருப்பிடம் we have completed the requirements that Bhagavan asks of a seeker, of a sadhaka, and we are embarking on sadhana, that prakarana that is going to deal with the sadhana that Bhagavan is teaching us. In Ulladu Narpadu, we began the work with the Mangala Shlokam, where the self was both referred to as the heart and the seat of the heart being the seat of consciousness, sans any other thought. But we could not go much into the concept of heart that Bhagavan teaches us in Ulladu Narpadu, because there the sadhana was directly centered on the raising of the ego. What is the ego? How dependent on it everything arises and everything sets, and how that place where it does not raise or set has to be sought for it to subside and merge into the self. Whereas in this work, in Ulladu Narpadu Anubandham, there is a whole series of verses beginning with 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. All these verses are going to deal with Hridayam, the self as Hridayam, Hridayam as the self, as well as Hridayam as the seat of the self. So one can call this sadhana as Hridaya Vidya. If we call the sadhana in Ulladu Narpadu as Atma Vicharam, the same sadhana can be called as Hridaya Vidya here or Brahma Vidya, because the main name given to the self here is Hridayam. So that is how we begin these two verses, 18 and 19. Irumulai nadubar adivaidu idinmel irumupporul நிரம்பல இவற்றுள் ஒரு பொருள் ஆம்பல் அரும்பென உள்ளே இருவிரல் அகத்தே இருவிரல் வலத்தே இருப்பது இதயம் அதன் முகம் நிகழுள தகமுள சிறு துளை Adanila Jadiyo Damarndula Dirundamam Adanai Asiritula Agilama Nadigal Aduvali Manadoli Avatrina Nirupidam. So let us look at Sadhuvam Swamigal's the meaning for these two verses in English before embarking on the meditation on what Bhagavan refers to as heart. Sadhuvam Swamigal, the first 18th verse refers to the physical location or the physical reference for the spiritual heart. So I had combined that with the 19th, and then when I looked at Sri Lakshman Sharma's commentary, he has also done the same, that 18 and 19 have been combined to give us the journey from the Stula to the Sukshma to the Karana to the Paramarthika. The journey becomes clear when we take both the verses together, because the first verse deals with the physical part, whereas the second verse deals with what is within the heart and what is the Sukshma Vastu that is present there, and how the light of consciousness itself is present there. So let us go into the meaning. Between the two breasts, below the chest and above the stomach, there are 6 things of many hues, many colors. Among these, one thing which resembles a lily bud and which is within 2 digits to the right from the center of the chest is the heart. So the first verse is entirely the physical location or dhyana lakshana. When our attention is of that nature, we may need a physical support. So where does the self manifest itself in the physical body? It manifests on the right side of the chest, some distance above the stomach, where 6 other organs are there. And Bhagavan in one of the talks refers to the 6 chakras. So Hridayam, as taught by Bhagavan, is the highest place into which all the chakras come and merge. So the 6 different organs of various hues. The chakras also are said to have various colors, starting from red going up to violet. The Vidgyar colors, based on their bandwidth, the lower bandwidths and the higher bandwidths, which then transcends into that which cannot be seen, ultraviolet rays. So that color scheme has been used for the chakras to indicate the lower bandwidth of light to the higher bandwidth of light. So of various hues, we, by Bhagavan's indication in the talks and by the reference to colors, we take that that is a reference to the chakras that are present. Why in the chest cavity? Because all the sadhana, according to Bhagavan, the movement has to be in the chest cavity itself, because he tells to Ganapati Muni, if the vasanas, which are the source of the whole requirement for sadhana arising, if they were to be located in the brain, in the head, then the mere removal of the head would have sufficed to remove the vasanas. He refers to the son of Kabir undergoing such a thing, where even without the head he continues dancing, and previously he comes back from near death experiences acting as though he is dead and coming out of death. All those Bhagavan refers to indicate that the existence of vasanas and the chance for spiritual growth is present in the chest cavity itself. in all the organs in the chest cavity itself. If the hridayam is in the chest cavity, we can take that the other are in the chest cavity itself. But the place is insignificant as we go into the subtle, causal and the transcendental. It is just for our reference sake. And of course, one can get the feeling of the throb of the spurana as one goes towards the current itself. One can start feeling the spurana in the right side of the chest. So that reference is there, and that is from Anubhava of Bhagavan and Anubhava of many devotees and disciples touching Bhagavan's the spurana sthala, or those who are doing sadhana will be able to realize this as a direct experience, because that is the lakshya for the, that is the physical lakshya for the spiritual heart, the hridayam. That is what is referred to in the first verse. The second part is about its mouth is closed in the tiny hole which is inside. There exists the dense darkness of ignorance together with the desire vasanas as anger, greed, delusion, pride, jealousy and so on, and all the major nadis are connected with it, and it is the abode of breath, the mind and the light of consciousness. So the second verse, it deals with the subtler aspects of the heart. So we begin our discussion by saying that heart is the self is the heart. So heart is another name given for the self. If Bhagavan doesn't stop there, the heart is also the seat of the self. If it is the seat of the self being everything, then one can understand there itself that everything is contained in the heart. Everything has its seat in the heart. In one form or the other, the heart contains everything. Now here the reference is to the negative emotions. One can understand it is the source or the place of resting for all emotions, positive emotions also. So we begin our discussions with more of experiential stories to indicate how the movement in chakras, how the passage through the nadis all come and rest in the Atma Nadi or Paranadi leading to the heart, and therefore heart is the source for everything. And by holding on to the Bhagavan's teachings of self-inquiry or holding the eye, one includes and transcends all the sadhanas that can be prescribed for journey of the sadhaka through the chakras, through the nadis, through the various emotions. So we'll be seeing that mostly through 2 or 3 incidents, but also through Bhagavan's teachings contained in the talks. Now these 2 verses are taken from the Malayalam work of Ayurveda called Ashtanga Hridayam. I have tried to seek the source of Ashtanga Hridayam in Sanskrit. I couldn't locate these verses there, but we can take that these verses are their source in the Malayalam work Ashtanga Hridayam. Now, is there any devotee who has experienced this, the physical heart, even in Bhagavan's time? We find in talk number 16, grand of devotee who is about 70 years old, Douglas Ainsley. He is the poet to whom K. Swaminathan sir also discusses, and this poet asks K. Swaminathan sir, have you not met Maharishi? You are staying so near. And then Swaminathan sir has come and met Bhagavan. That is the narrative K. Swaminathan sir gives. So it is that Douglas Ainsley or Grandduff who narrates his experience. He is the one who says Bhagavan is gentler than gentleness itself. Though in one glance he can understand all the subtle or gross faults of anybody in front of him, Bhagavan goes to silence, and through the silence he benefits himself and benefits the one present in the most subtle and best of gentlest of ways, says Grandaf in another article. Here, the Anubhava of right side of the chest, I am going to read. The reply sent to Riga was read out to him. Tamil songs from Maharishi's truth revealed, and the Vedas were repeated in his presence. This is in presence of Grandaf. Grandaf considered the recitations magnificent. From here it starts. He came the next afternoon, and to the wonder of others, many others wonder how this is the first visit. How it is that such people get Anubhava in the first visit itself. He came the next afternoon, and to the wonder of others, had an experience on the previous night, which he repeated to the Maharishi. It was that he had seen something like an electric light within himself in the heart center on the right side. It was that he had seen something like an electric light within himself in the heart center on the right side. And he added further that he had seen the sun shining within. Within that, he has seen the sun shining. Maharishi smiled a little and then had a translation of Atma Vidya. Bhagavan is confirming self-knowledge read out to him, wherein there is the cryptic saying that realization consists in reaching the Atman, the self, which is the expanse of consciousness, Chid Vyoman, as distinguished from the mind, which is the expansion of Chitta Vyoman. This explanation appealed to him. So whenever somebody sees the light, as we have seen earlier, Bhagavan calls it as the Chidakasha. Here Bhagavan is referring it to as Chid Vyoman. It is different from the expanse of thoughts, that is Chitta Vyoman of the mind. But where is the experience? Where is the experience of the light? In the right side of the chest, says Grandaf. So that is with reference to the Anubhavam. Now we take the overall journey, the spiritual journey, that we all are practicing the Bhakti Marga. So my better half has been doing this by Bhagavan's grace after he appeared in her dream from I think around 2006 or 2000, around that time. From there she has been completely changed by Bhagavan, and she has started the Bhakti Margam practices in under Bhagavan's grace. It started with Aksharamanamalai, Parayanam, then the whole of Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, then Upadeshasaram, then Ulladu Narpadu. All these Parayanams she does, and she does meditation. But in the Parayanam journey, we find the journey through the chakras, the journey through what these people are referring to as the 6 organs, and heart being one of them, and the nadis. How profound is Parayanam is that in the initial stages, both of us I used to sit with her and I can't use the word help, but participate in or share in the Bhakti Margam journey. And we started off with Aksharamanamalai. It took 6 months for us to learn Aksharamanamalai by heart. But by then the struggling with the words, the Shabdara, Swadhisthana and Manipura, out of the 6 chakras living out Sahasrara, Parayana lifts the devotee gathering, the integration of the Jiva is required, which refers to, the Swadhisthana, the Anahata, the heart chakra, all these start when we dhyana, and started off, you don't need to sit, I can do self-inquiry on my own. When Parayana started holding, when Bhagavan came to a point where there was to sit with, that was about 1 year or so, we used to sit together for the practice morning. Then one fine day she just said, you don't need to sit. So there is in the path of bhakti, and we can actually see what are the chakras in which they are, and naturally the participating in the other one, good and bad, the third eye chakra, they say, what is witnessing becomes reached in the surrender path. The surrender and the bad also. Now, which will be seeing nature, the ida and pinga nostrils, they say, but as Parayana lifts us, where to Bhagavan happens, we stop debating in those unnecessarily to for us. That is stopped once you reach in Parayana, that any of the activities happen that transcends all this. Surrender to Bhagavan, the prayer brings us up in the chakras to the Anahata and the Sahasrara, but Bhagavan, the Anubhava is not. So from Sahasrara to the Hridayam, through the Atmanadi, or that in due course, the connection between and how it from Bhakti, how Bhagavan Atmavicharam, and to the Atmanadi or Paranadi, the Parayanam lifts us. That's why who is doing Parayanam as sadhana would ask Bhagavan, meaning of this. Bhagavan would say, doing Parayanam, its meaning. Later on, we'll be see Parayanam repeatedly with awareness. Bhagavan would say, in that, what is the just stick to the Parayanam. Holding the steadily will lift our energies. Now, but this where we lift up, which is it possible a mix-up of energy? In her case, by Bhagavan's grace, the Bhakti, by total grace of it by Bhagavan, what to say? We cannot say anything about that. In case, when I look back into this chakra, to the re-entry into the spiritual practices, if I look to the point in 19, there was a mix of the chakras. At one point, part of I would be a highly empathetic person. In a game, we are playing some game and some opponent is losing. My heart will go out to him. Even in childhood, when my mother would be reading some stories, if something happens to the hero, Flash Gordon or Mandrake or Phantom, I would start crying, and mother will avoid that. She will avoid that and she will read something else. She will tell something more Mangalakara so that this fellow doesn't cry. But the point was, it was completely mixed up with certain misunderstanding in the other chakras. There was empathy, there was compassion, there was looking to the others. That is part of the Jiva had indeed some qualities of the higher chakras, but there was total confusion in the lower chakras, where the physical steadiness, the emotional steadiness, the identification of the self was not properly formed. In the one side there would be empathy, but that was falsely applied because it went along with letting down close people. That is, there is a misunderstanding that the love for others means a neglect or non-empathetic approach to those who are near. Or if you leave the people, take work. If we have that kind of mix-up, in me, what used to happen was, it becomes a dreamer kind of situation, because what is far away, I would empathize with that situation more than a paper to be attended now in front of me. So this imbalance was there in the chakra journey for me, and that got stabilized once I started the spiritual journey properly with my friend. Once I can see that now, once the ethical practices were restarted, the chakra started stabilizing. That is, the identity started stabilizing. But really the whole process is understood when we hold the Atmanadi. Because there is not a single chakra which can arise without the raising of the eye. So the inference that we can get from these two narratives is that perhaps that If one can sit for self-inquiry, if one can be steadily devoted to Bhagavan and practice the Bhakti Margas, that is excellent. But even better if one can hold the Atmanadi in self-inquiry with Bhagavan's grace, that averts all these problems. Because when we go ahead and look at the three nadis into which all the 101 or 72,000 nadis are concentrated in, the three nadis which rise through these chakras and come up to the nostrils, they are called as Ida, Pingala and Sushumna. Now the Ida, Pingala have qualities, have good and bad, have holding and letting go, all this. Whereas the Sushumna is neutral. Neutral means it's neither good nor bad. It is neither grasping nor letting go. That kind of nadi it is. And we find that this journey through Ida, Pingala and Sushumna common to all human beings. Bhagavan is the self of all. So I give you two examples of how a normal human being rises through the good and bad and finally comes to the neutral. To me, to continue my experience or anubhava, to me, the good and the bad started settling down properly. The movement in chakra started settling down and stabilizing. The moment I met my friend V.K.L.V. Kumar, because we had started practicing speaking truth, holding on to ethics at all costs, and then he had introduced me to meditation, and then there was the Japa Sadhana from Kanchimat, and the meditation under J. Krishnamurti, the letting go of thoughts, that brought me to the Pingala, the Sushumna, the neutral, because there the practice primarily was of can I look at any object or can I look at thought without good or bad, without judgment. And I could easily see that both good and bad started falling off the moment I came to witnessing. That is where the Sushumna journey started. But still, it still had some elements of Ida and Pingala for me. But we find this journey up the Ida, Pingala, that is good and bad, and finally to Sushumna. The other thing was from a paleontologist who's also YouTube is there, who goes up the whole of fossil study. Then he comes to human beings, and there he comes to the Ajna Chakra. There he realizes that all these happenings, the millions of years of evolution, and the leading to the formation of human beings, the formation of human beings would not have happened if one incident in that whole million years had changed. If any one incident had changed, this we standing here would not have happened according to his study. So for that moment itself, he realizes more than study of fossils, the responsibility we human beings have for this whole process, this whole environment, this whole thing that God is doing. What is our responsibility to it? So his consciousness rises to the Agnya Chakra. But more clearly, we find in the journey of Richard Feynman, but that gives us an indication of how a jiva sincerely practicing the truths of life lifts itself up through the chakras. He is a scientist. He's a scientist and he understands at some point in his journey in science, he understands science is a power which can be used for good or bad, which doesn't have indications as to how to use it for good or bad. Up to that point, his research in science comes. This can be arrived at by anybody in any field. If they dig deep enough with Shraddha, they will come to that point that the power that the field gives does not come with key. This he realizes on a visit to Honolulu, where a Buddhist monk to the Buddhist, this one he has gone, and the Buddhist monk says, I am going to tell you something that you are all not going to forget. It's a group of people who have gone. And this gentleman says he has not forgotten it at all. That means that change has been clearly there. The Buddhist monk gives him a shloka that that the keys to heaven are given to everyone and it is present within everyone. The keys to heaven are given to everyone and it is present within everyone. However, the same keys open the doors to hell also. The same keys, so the same keys are available for you to use as good or as bad. He meditates on that and he finds that any power that, just like science is a power, finds education is a power. Educational power can be used for good or bad. Communication between nations can be used for good or bad. Slowly he finds even the power of peace, which is valued very high, can be used for good or bad. It can lead to laziness and some habits related to laziness, he says. So it can be used for good or bad. So therefore, he takes his journey into the higher chakras. He gets the Vishwarupa Darshana. He gets the Vishwarupa Darshana means he says that once you start meditating on this, the energies go and you get a world vision of things. How the fossil studier got a whole world vision and our responsibility. The scientist also gets a world vision, how the things are taking place overall. And he finds that now what is the way we can come out of the good and the bad. He says that the only way is for the intellect to surrender with the understanding that the intellect can never know in this complicated sequence of things where good turns into bad and bad turns into good. The intellect can never know what is really good or what is really bad. And he says that is the open channel. There the chakras, the nadis, both the Ida and Pingala are completely dropped. As I said in Parayana, how when surrender of good and bad happens, one comes to the Sushumna and goes up. This scientist also transcends the good and the bad through surrender to pure knowledge. That the open channel is for the thought to be made free, for the I to be made free. How? Through surrender. That I do not know. Somebody comes and tells to Bhagavan that Socrates says, I know that I do not know. Bhagavan says that is not ajnana, that is jnana. To understand that the ego can never know the source and be totally surrendered brings us up the chakra. When the surrender of good and bad is complete, the Ida and Pingala nerves are left and the Sushumna is held. In the witnessing that we had discussed in verse number 6, the Sakshi Bhava, right from beginning, the Sushumna nerve only is held. Right from the observation of the physical body, observation of breath, observation of mind, that is thought, observation of intellect, observation of ego, all that without the good and the bad is done through the Sushumna. And then what comes through the Sahasrara, it has to end through the Atmanadi or Paranadi to the heart. There the self-inquiry will start, says Bhagavan. In all paths, they can bring only to the Chidvyoman, where Grand Death came, where everything is one light. But from there, who is seeing the light? Who is the one who is beholding the light? That has to be asked, and the Sahasrara too has to come and rest in the Hridayam, the Hridayam of Bhagavan. Now this is the journey we find for all living beings. That Bhagavan himself confirms when one of the devotees asks that is it not good to study the history of mankind? That the intellect has grown over the time. In olden days, there would be no intellect, but now the intellect has grown in human beings. Bhagavan says, intellect is only used by the self. Why should we go into study of history and geography and all that? The actual quote is from talk number 112. The Englishman casually said that in prehistoric ages there was spirituality but not high intellect, whereas intellect has now developed. Shri Bhagavan pointed out that intellect raises the question, whose intellect? The answer is of the self. So intellect is a tool of the self. The self uses intellect for measuring variety. Intellect is not the self, nor can it be apart from the self. The self alone is eternal. Intellect is only a phenomenon. People speak of development of variety as being development of intellect. Intellect was always there. Dhata, yata, parvam, akalpaya. The Creator created just as before. Consider your own state day by day. There is no intellect in dreamless deep sleep, but it is there now. There is no intellect in a child. It develops with age. How could there be manifestation of intellect without its seed in the sleep state and in the child? Why go to history to teach this fundamental fact? The level of truth of history is only the level of truth of the individual. How Bhagavan sums up all the millions of years of evolution studied with so much difficulty by the others into one day. All that movement in chakras, all that raising up from this or that could be done only because of the self present within everyone. All that evolution could take place. Why go into all that journeys? Study one day what happens to you. Study from childhood to no, that's enough. In the child, the growth in the chakras is all dormant. In your deep sleep, all the movement in chakras are dormant. It is not there. Whereas I is there. I am still there. So hold that which is there rather than go into this multiplicity, says Bhagavan. That if one can hold the I, the Atmanadi, that takes care of good, bad and the neutral. See the beauty of Bhagavan's teachings. Bhagavan does not ask us even to do this witnessing. This witnessing also has some element of good and bad in it, because we have to differentiate between good and bad and with effort come to the neutral. Whereas if you hold the I, this doubt is also not there. Am I witnessing or am I still having good and bad in me? That doubt is also not there. So if one can hold the I directly, there can be nothing like that. Now, to evidence the movement through the chakras, whether the Ajnanis, the ones who have not yet realized the self, what happens in them, Bhagavan gives us a practical demonstration through two people with whom he has tried the mukti, his power of touch to give mukti. Amma Azhagammal and Palani Swami is attended, and there is an independent case of Swami Ramanagiri, who is actually from a very foreign land. As a youngster, he comes to India, and in the late 40s, in a 15-day stay, I think, with Bhagavan, he who is a yogi, who is a practitioner of pranayama, he says, I was made to realize I am a fool. And that was his realization, God realization, and he goes out of the ashram after that. His samadhi is there somewhere near Madurai. So in his last days, the last moment, one of his close Sishya's notes, he was a pranayama, he was practitioner of, he says, the pranayama he could do, he wouldn't recommend anybody to practice. He actually announces that let prana come, let us go, and he moves through the Sahasrara. And in Bhagavan's experience with Palani Swami, in the talks, Bhagavan says, Bhagavan had kept the same method as with Amma. This was before Amma's absorption. One hand on the head and one hand on the spiritual heart. And in the talks it is described, the vasanas or the journeys of that jiva are now absorbed by the I current of Bhagavan. This Purana, which is running through the body of Bhagavan, is now absorbing that journey. And all the vasanas, all the desires, the hidden desires, are all absorbed into the self. And from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., Bhagavan does this for Amma, and for a long time he does for Palaniswami also. And Bhagavan says in Palaniswami's case, when all the desires are absorbed and the I thought, the jiva gets absorbed into the self, there is something like a tingling of bells. So, like the bells we do to call the manifestation of the self from the Vigraha, what we do, when we do Harati, we request the self in the Vigraha to come and bless us. That's why we do. The same sound is felt when the reverse process happens, when the jiva merges into the self. And Bhagavan says, as soon as he felt the tingling sensation of the jiva subsiding into the self, he took off his hands. But the Palaniswami's the individuality had not yet been completely absorbed, so it passes through the eyes. There is a movement in the outer through the eyes. Bhagavan says that's a higher birth, because the chakra here is Ajna chakra. It indicates the higher birth, says Bhagavan, but it was not absorption into the self. So because of this experience in Amma's case, Bhagavan says he kept the hand for some more time. From the apparently the sound which comes even at the level of Ajna chakra, Sahasrara to Hrudayam, till the jiva is completely subsided. Bhagavan keeps the hand, and after a few minutes of that tingling sound only Bhagavan removes, and it is written that Amma is completely absorbed into the self. Now this indicates to us in Palaniswami, Amma and Ramanagiri Swamigal that to one who is able to subside the I into the self with the grace of Bhagavan and with sadhana, there is no birth or rebirth. That's why Bhagavan would always ask, when somebody would ask what is going to be my rebirth, Bhagavan will ask, see if your birth is reality now. Your birth itself is not a reality. Find out that it is unreal and abide in the self. He would say, when that happens, there is no birth or rebirth. Whereas when that does not happen, then there is this cycle. Bhagavan says, I could see that the jiva swings between this body and the next. And because the attachment to the previous body is not yet over, it keeps swinging and it's a dream-like state, and then it drops this body and goes to that if the jnana merger is not complete. So the chakra movement, having whatever sadhana we have done, as Sri Krishna assures that according to your sadhana, I will make you be reborn. There is the chakra-based movement of the life outside and inside. That's why Bhagavan says, complete the journey inside, turn inward. What is a Mukti Loka and what is a Baddha Loka? We see Ramanagiri Swamigal going through the Sahasrara. So there is a movement, but he himself is an enlightened being. He is in the Mukti plane. So when there is a inward turning of the consciousness, the doership goes. The doership is not there, and one goes to wherever Ramanagiri Swamigal goes, and one has to complete the journey for abiding in the self. But where the Hridayam, the Lakshya given by Bhagavan, is held, there is not even that journey to another plane of non-doership. That's why in many places in talks, Bhagavan would refer to non-doership. If non-doership is there, that should be enough, is it not? Like that. But in many other places where people will refer to non-doership, he will say non-existence of the non-self. He will not stop with non-doership. He will take complete non-existence of the ego, the doer itself. So we find all this in the movements in the chakra and the abidance in the heart. Therefore, the Bhagavan's teachings of Hridaya Vidya, of holding the eye, the Atma Nadi, it solves us this problem of imbalance of energies in the chakras, where we are going to stay in the chakras, whether there is going to be birth or rebirth, and whether we have come to neutrality beyond good or bad. All these doubts are kept at abeyance, and one is able to hold for whom? For whom is this thought? There is no good, there is no bad, there is no neutral. Any thought that arises, ask for whom? Hold the eye. There the Hridayam, the place where all the nadis end, all the chakras end, the mind, the breath, and the light of consciousness which Grandaf sees, that exists, all that are present in the heart. So, if one can, even a single thought kept aside, still for a trace, takes you a long way towards the heart, says Bhagavan. So, if one can hold the eye directly, one should, of course, the bhakti of Bhagavan, the Parayanam, the Dhyanam, Bhagavan's grace will stabilize us, will give us the identity as devotee and lift us relentlessly. But if one can, one should follow the Guru Upadesham and hold the eye directly. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us sit for Atma Ucharam for 10 minutes. Revathi, you can set the time for us. Bhagavate Shri Ramana. Namo Ramana. Namo Ramana ka.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as the self in all beings. By the immense grace of that self, manifest as Ramana. We have just that for the practice of self-inquiry. And earlier to that, we have been doing Mananam on Bhagavan's words. And it is not a very, in one sense, from the intellect's point of view, not a very easy terrain to have covered. But Nandakumarji has made it as simple could be. The chakra sadhana, he has put it for us in a very, very simple and beautiful manner. And even as I was listening to him describing Ushama's journey, as he was giving the description, I was wondering, it doesn't seem to be like that. The movement doesn't seem to be in a single direction. It seems to be all mixed up. And then he gave us the example of his own case, as if he read my thoughts. And he gave the example that it was mixed up earlier to the self-inquiry sadhana. But the whole point which he finally brought home, which is most important for us, is that all this is good for us to know, because each and every piece of knowledge helps us to get rid of certain blockages that the intellect raises. And when unawareness is there, lots of blockages are made by the mind. We do not know where we are stuck. Even though we may be doing self-inquiry, because of the vasana bala, and because of the lack of 100% faith in self-inquiry, and because we are not able to give 100% time to self-inquiry, because our sadhana is usually mixed up. It is not an eka patha. It will have some self-inquiry, it will have some parayana, it will have some bhakti, it will have some truth speaking. It will have various aspects. So we can get confused and go into one path if we do not hold on. And there, of course, Bhagavan tells us in Ashtakam, if we can hold on to one path, like he said that Ushama goes to surrender, if we can hold on to one path in every moment, then that is fine. But to bring us to that point also, a lot of clarity may be required, and a lot of up and down swings may be there. Emotional swings may be there. It may not just be a mix-up, it may be swings also. It may be one day very good, one day very bad, one moment very good, one moment very bad. And in that area, one gets very confused. And once I had a very beautiful clue from Nandakumarji, again in one of the satsangs, where he was saying that thoughts are just thrown up by Ishvara, and they may be of any nature. They may not necessarily be in progression or all good, all bad. They may be very mixed up, and they may be anything. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what they are. So that is the ultimate point to which we have to come. That everything that is being described in our journey as an identity does not matter, because everything has to be dropped into the self. But it matters at that level, in that manifestation, at that point of time, for each one of us differently. And that's why Bhagavan has given various explanations as well. He has answered many questions, and he has given these translations because of their relevance to our sadhana at some point of time. And we do not know when that point of time is, but if he has brought it to our knowledge, it is for each one of us to imbibe it, and he will only reveal how it is relevant to us. That again is not something which we understand also. We don't clearly understand what is relevant to us and why we are being given any life experience whatsoever. So why the words of the Supreme One come to us, and how they come to us, and how they reveal themselves at different stages in our lives. The same parayana, the same words, suddenly one word lights up for us. So how it happens, we don't know. So this is the understanding. Today Bhagavan has given us this insight into the simpler, the spiritual aspect of the chakra sadhana. And he has started that entry into what Nandakumarji described as the Hridaya Vidya. And great ones talk about that. In Ramana Gita, there is a whole chapter dedicated to Hridaya Vidya. And Vishwanatha Swami in Ashtotram, he says, Harda Vidya Prakashakaya Namaha. So the Hridaya Vidya is something which is very, very special to Bhagavan's teachings. Then Nandakumarji gave the example of Grand Tough. I am not having a very clear memory of Poonjaji's experience, but recently Ujjwal reminded me that it is very, very similar to the description. In fact, Poonjaji talks about the lotus, downturned lotus getting upturned and flowering also, to the best of my knowledge, and bliss flooding all his entire body, like all the nadis getting inundated with that bliss. So that experience is there. And I think that this location and this, not the location, but the description of the downturned lotus, which I do not now recall.
It's there in the talks, Chandogya Upanishad.
It is there.
The reference is there in the talks.
It is there.
About 2-3 different types of references.
Descriptions.
Or Vivarana is there.
Vivarana is there. And I have found some devotees sharing with me that they found that description very, very useful. See, if somebody is very visually sensitive, maybe it's useful. But for somebody who is not visually sensitive, it may not be of much significance. Similarly, the location given in the physical body, Bhagavan clearly says it is because of our identification with a frame, with a form, that this location is given in the body. And when Vishwanatha Swami first pointed out this sadhana to me, and he said to focus in the heart, region of the spiritual heart, while searching for the source or looking at the source of the mantra. And he told me, what I am telling you now is a concept for you. It is not the actual anubhava. See, if I say that it is in this particular space, to the right in this particular space, that is a concept. But he says, let it be, it's a concept which helps. The concept will help you, and at some point it may turn into anubhava. And again, as Nandakumarji told us, there are, in the Ramana sadhana, devotees do feel connected to this spiritual heart, and they do feel the aham spurana, which is very typical to Bhagavan's teaching. And we find, he said also, we say slightly, devotees say, old devotees tell us that his head being slightly tilted to the right side. And I think in an earlier discussion, Nandakumarji has said that people could even feel that throb if they touched Bhagavan's chest.
And there is a reference in talks that 3 devotees' names was also given. That they have actually felt and...
This is there. It is very, very... See, when the... Yes, sir. Yes.
And it is the experience as we go in Atmacharam.
Yes, sir.
It is undeniably present. That the throb is present.
Yes, sir. So that is very much there for Bhagavan's devotees. This is a significant reference from that perspective. But it doesn't mean that, as he's again, and Nandakumarji said, as we go into that subtle experience, the space, time, everything will disappear. It happens even in physical examples. I used to give the example of the transistor radio. Now recently I heard Brahmaji giving the example of the different channels which come in the television. He says, where are the channels? Not even one of them is sitting inside the box. So it is, but we have to tune in. If we want a particular channel, we have to tune in, and we use a remote, we use all kinds of physical devices to tune in and see that show, which is not sitting there. So it is not limited to that. It can be seen anywhere across the world. So that is the same thing with the self also, but it is a very helpful sadhana to help us to tune in to begin with. And then, of course, the physical dimensions will automatically be dissolved. So that is something, because people do have this doubt. People have asked Bhagavan, why a location for something which is all pervading? And he has said that it is only because you identify with a body that this is given to you as an aid. And it is certainly a powerful aid. It cannot be denied at all. It's a powerful aid. And so far as the journey goes, Bhagavan has given this, used this placing of his hand on the heart for Mother Aragammal also, and later for Cow Lakshmi. For Valli and Jackie also, he has specifically used this way of giving them liberation. As for Parani Swami, I always used to wonder that if Parani Swami didn't get it, then where do I have any hope? But then I also understand that birth is something so strange. It is happening every minute in a way, and until I am identified, birth is inevitable. And it happens every moment. It happens because whenever I rise as Sharada, I'm born anew. I'm just born. With every thought, I am being born. And there is a journey. So another physical body, whatever it means, it doesn't mean something very different from what we are going through right now. And I heard through the words of a sage that if Ishvara himself says, I couldn't do it, it means it was not in his chittam to do it. He may say that it didn't happen, the things came out, it came out, but he had another purpose. And that sage had communicated to another devotee, actually, who shared it with me, that if Bhagavan chooses, whatever Bhagavan chooses for us, should be the best for us. That whatever Bhagavan gives us, whatever is the Ishvara Chittam, there cannot be something better than the Ishvara Chittam. So in surrender, we have to understand that, because it is impossible to imagine that we can even surrender one thought. Without that grace, it is impossible to imagine that it can happen. It is impossible to imagine anything can happen, anything whatsoever can happen. So when we are totally anyhow helpless, and when he is all loving, what does it matter is what we have to get to. But there is a reason why Bhagavan does this. There is a reason why he explains this. It is to make us not allow us to be complacent, to tell us that, yes, if mother had to go through so many hours of work, so-called work by Bhagavan, there is a question of where we are. It's just that we have to keep doing whatever he allows us to do. Keep trying. That's all we can do. And that too, recognizing that even that effort is happening every moment only by his grace. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.
There is a doubt by Vidyaji. Can I just take a minute for
Yes,
that?
sir. Yes, sir.
Vidyaji has asked, Bhagavan has said that Anahata Chakra is behind what he defined as the spiritual heart, and it is not Samvit. That the Anahata Chakra, which we referred as we go in, of course, the spiritual heart is here. The chakras are all supposed to be lined up with the spine. So the Anahata Chakra, which actually gives empathy and the compassion for others, it expands first integrated self. First we have to find our identity, then there is the oneness with others. That is what is in the Anahata Chakra. So it is sometimes confused with the Samvit. Samvit is the Chit Vyoman, which is Darshana given to Grandaf. That Samvit is the universal consciousness. It is not yet reached in the Anahata Chakra. It is still, the journey is to be made through the throat to the Ajna to the Sahasrara. So 3 more chakras are there in the chakra journey, but all these are combined by Bhagavan by the Atmanadi. The Atmanadi from Sahasrara to the heart. Bhagavan says that's where the vasanas come and play in the brain. So says catch hold of it there itself. So when Bhagavan makes us attend to the vasanas, he is making us hold the Atmanadi directly. So it's a great blessing. I hope I have clarified something. But the Shakti of Bhagavan, even in the other, see, there is no way the Jiva can explain how it turned inward. So irrespective of which chakra or which Atma Ucharam, the Bhagavan's Shakti and his calling us for sadhana and his grace should never be lost sight of. That for the Jiva Bhava to be completely absorbed, we should never forget our past. We might have integrated to feel one with all also. We might feel that we are all one, all the animals are one. When Bhagavan says that monkey and I are one, the tree, we may get those feelings. But how did we come there? Because Bhagavan is present as the Adi, Ahamatma Gudakesha Sarvabhuta Shayastitah, Aham Adischa Madhyamcha Bhutana Manta Evacha. So any sadhaka is reliant on the self which is pre-existing. So the practice of what we are referring to as Bhagavan's grace should never be lost sight of. And what I have come to learn is that if the Jnana Marga is pursued without that, there is a discontentment that the grace is commonly available to everyone. Therefore, we cannot go to anybody for help. This kind of look is there for some Jnana Margis. Actually, we should be totally grateful for that grace to be so all-powerful and encompassing everyone. But instead of that, the ahankara and the selfishness, it makes you feel desolate that the self is not helpful. It is commonly available to everyone, but we have to do our work. As though we are doing our work without grace's presence, the Jnana Marga can become dry like that. So I feel as ones who have come through bhakti, we should never lose track of the grace having called us, because that turning point towards spiritual journey again or for the first time, we can never explain by the ego's nature. In fact, there is an interesting suggestion by Feynman that each molecule is doing only its own work, its own journey. But there is an upliftment because self is already present. Because God is already present within every atom, the whole evolution takes place because God is present within every atom. That is the suggestion he brings, though he is not courageous enough to say like that, because they still want to rely on logic. But since we have the advantage of Bhakti Margam, should never lose track of the grace which has called us. Hold it and practice whatever the practice we are doing. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramana.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.